1. I was about 7 years old, my brother about 10. It was well past our bedtime when our mum woke us up off the couch to put us to bed. Our dad worked construction out of town back then, so it was often just the three of us in the house for weeks at a time. Up the stairs and to the immediate right was our parents' bedroom. Going left put you in the middle of a hallway. Taking another left down that hallway led to my brother's room. The opposite end was my room, which was also across the hall from our upstairs bathroom. At either end of the hallway are window doors we always kept locked and rarely used. The door on my end led to a balcony overlooking our front yard, and the door on my brother's end opened to our back porch. The house kind of leans into a small hill. My brother and mum both had a habit of waking up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. I only knew this because I was always a light sleeper, and they just couldn't help flushing with the door wide open. This night, however, my brother stopped on his way to his room and came back towards the bathroom. I'm going to try to pee before I go to bed. The past few nights I've been too afraid to walk to the bathroom. I keep seeing a man wearing stripes at the end of the hallway. I don't know if my mum wrote it off as my brother telling ghost stories to try and scare me, or if she was already half asleep and didn't catch it. But she didn't react to it at all, my brother's confession. I, on the other hand, was terrified by it. The fear of seeing a ghost like that at the end of my hallway or through the windows is the reason I started running from the stairs to my bedroom at night. Years later, when I was about 18, my mum and I were having a conversation in her car about a dog we had had for a very short time when I was little. We were sharing stories about Max's tendency towards destroying my shoes and other unruly behaviours when my mum blurted out, "Do you remember that time I opened the front door for the cops and Max ran inside in the kitchen and started tearing up that big bag of dog food that we had?" This really caught me by surprise, because in all the years I lived in that house, we never once called the cops. Gun owner family in a quiet rural neighbourhood, etc. I asked her what she was talking about, and she looked equally surprised, as if she'd just revealed something by accident. "Oh, that's right. I never told you because you were too young at the time. One night, I woke up hearing noises outside my window, and when I looked, I saw a man staring into my bedroom." She went on to describe how turning on the lights caused him to take off running, and how she grabbed my dad's pistol before calling the cops. I can't remember all the details I gave them when they showed up. Tall, white male, wearing a striped shirt and jeans, short dark hair, something like that. They said it matched the description of a man they were looking for in the area. It turns out he'd escaped from jail on a murder charge. Now I know it sounds so obvious hearing those two stories back to back, but it wasn't until a few years ago in my mid-20s that I pieced together that my brother had unknowingly warned us about a murderer who spent multiple nights casing our home. 2. This past Monday, my co-workers and I returned to our hotel from a day of work out in the field. Rebecca and I walked to our rooms, and as we stood outside of our rooms, I opened mine and I saw someone in the bathroom. I said, "Hello?" Nobody answered. My first instinct was that it was the cleaning lady in there for some reason. And then I saw my bag with my clothes in her hands. I said to my co-worker, "There's a woman in my room." Then I asked the woman, "What are you doing with my stuff?" It all gets a little fuzzy here because I can't remember everything I said and what she said, but she kept mumbling about how her key still worked, how it still worked, and that's how she got in. I was in shock, and she was obviously very flustered, having been caught mid-robbery. She dropped my bags and fumbled around with her purse and a white plastic bag. By this time, my co-worker was behind me watching all of this insanity unfold. This woman was scrambling and walking towards the door, and I said, "What's in that bag?" thinking it is probably just my stuff. And she said, No, it's just my things, I'll show you. And so she did. I looked and I didn't see anything of mine. And so since I'm obviously in shock at this time, I let her leave. I went into my room and it had been ransacked. I did a quick look around to see if anything had been taken. All of my electronics were still there. Then I went into the bathroom and I saw my underwear, my bikini, and my clothes shoved into my own bags randomly. Even my passport was shoved in there. Then I looked on the counter and I saw that she'd got into my medication. I'm not sure what was going through my head at the moment other than that I wanted it back. So I ran out of the door to go and find her. I ran to the laundry room downstairs and out to the sides of the hotel, and I didn't see her. I realised I was never going to find her, so my co-worker and I went down to the lobby to tell them what happened, and then we called the police. We went back up to my room to wait, and I noticed that there was a little metal bat, a little larger than one of those novelty wooden bats you can get at a baseball game. But there's also a flashlight on the end. She must have left it behind in a hurry. She also left behind a necklace that must have fallen out of her bag when she was scrambling with mine. I was mostly freaking out at this point because I thought that she'd gotten away with my medication that I need. The police got there and took our statements and looked around the room as well. One thing that I noticed is that there were bits of drywall in the sink, and I pointed that out to the cops, but none of us really knew where it had come from. We started looking at the door and the windows to see if she'd pried her way in somehow, but there was nothing. So we kind of just went with the idea that she'd had a spare key or something, even though the hotel front desk was adamant that there was no way that could be. The officer that came brought 2 more officers as backup because they thought the woman might still be in the vicinity, but after our statements were taken, there was nothing else they could really do, so they left. I sat down to finally make some calls to tell people, and as I'm on the phone, I'm still thinking about the drywall in the sink, and it still didn't make sense to me. So I'm on the phone and looking at the drywall and the mirror on the wall right above it, and then it hit me. I got my co-worker and asked her to help me pull at this mirror on the wall. We took the mirror down, and there's a hole just big enough for a desperate junkie to squeeze through. I asked Brian and Rebecca if we should call the cops again and let them know that I found this, and my boss said, "There's still 2 cop cars in the parking lot." So I went down to tell them, and the female cop kind of rolled her eyes, but the young guy said, "I'll come and check it out." They both came back up, looked in the hole, and found a pillow, blankets, cigarettes, clothes, and toothbrushes. This woman had been living in the wall behind my mirror for God knows how long. She had access to me and my room at all times. I know it might have been hard to picture, but there was a crawl space about 2 feet wide in between 2 rows of rooms. One of the officers called the original officer to come back and take pictures of this. She explained to him what's going on, and all I hear over the radio is, "No fucking way." He comes back, takes pictures, and is just as mind-blown as the rest of us. Obviously, we left immediately. What's even crazier is she had probably been there a long time. The last time we stayed at this hotel, I would randomly smell cigarette smoke and assume someone was smoking in their rooms, and it was just travelling through the vents. But nope, a junkie was smoking just on the other side of my mirror. She had access to other rooms too. The holes in the walls were from a renovation that the hotel hadn't properly patched up, and just covered up with mirrors. She could have been hanging out in people's rooms while they were gone. Anyway, this was insane, and I'm taking a little time off, posting from my mobile, so sorry if the formatting is off. 3. Warning, long post, but I recommend you to read it all. Okay, so this happened when I was around 9 years old, I'm 25 now, and it's something I will never forget. It gives me goosebumps to this day. I live in a terrace house, 4 houses combined, and my neighbours and I each have our own little patio. There's a small road 10 metres from my yard where people do their Sunday walks and so on. Only a small fence separates my small yard and patio from that road. I live in a pretty crowded area with several of these terrace houses spread around in my neighbourhood, so seeing people walk on that road is pretty normal for me. Seeing random people standing on my patio is not. When I was 9, I usually got home from school about an hour before my mum got home from work. I lived maybe 50 metres away from school, so my mum figured I was mature enough to be home alone for around an hour before she got home. This one day, I got home from school. I did the usual thing, which was to make sure I locked the front door and double-checked the back door leading to the patio was also locked. I was 9. Being alone was a little scary, even though it was in the middle of the day, and only for an hour. I then rushed to my room upstairs to play as much PlayStation as possible before my mum came home and made me do homework. While playing, I heard this noise coming from the patio outside my window. My room was located 1 floor over the patio with a view to the road I told you about before. It was kind of like the sound of a cat, but my cat had been missing for over 3 months. Hope sparked and I thought, oh my god, did he finally come back? I ran downstairs to check if this was my cat, but the sight that met me gives me goosebumps just writing this. There was a guy standing on my patio. A tall guy with black hair covering half of his eyes, making him like a male version of the Ring woman or something. I could hear him making high-pitched sounds, also like a cat meowing. A brown liquid was running down from his mouth, almost like I could see him spitting out my dad's stomped cigarettes. He was actually eating from the ashtray. I was frozen observing this. Eventually, I snapped out of it and screamed so loud that the man must have heard it. He didn't react. He kept on eating from the ashtray. I ran upstairs to my room, locked the door, and called my mom, who called the cops. I've never been more terrified in my life. Laying in bed under my sheets, shivering with fear, as I hear these creepy high-pitched noises from the guy eating cigarettes from the ashtray on my patio. I kind of blacked out for a moment, because the next thing I remember is the police arriving on the road by my yard. I hear them talking to the guy, saying stuff like, "What are you doing? Get over here or we will come down and arrest you," and so on. He didn't respond, but the high-pitched sounds are more frequent and louder now. I decided to look through the window, feeling safe now that the cops were there. I could see 2 police officers standing by my fence, 1 man and a woman. I did not see the creepy man, however, because he was standing directly 1 story under me. The police jumped over the fence, and I remember hearing the creepy guy scream louder than anything I've ever heard before. He charged the female police officer with full force, and he fucking knocked her out cold. The male officer then immediately tased the guy, leaving him shaking on the ground and screaming still. The policeman struggled to keep him on the ground while putting handcuffs on him, but he eventually made it. After a while, he managed to wake up the female police officer, who seemed to be badly hurt. He called for backup and an ambulance, and then he sees me standing in the window above him. The expression on my face must have been something else, because he just looked at me and said, "I sure as hell hope you didn't see all that." I started to cry. By this time, neighbours started to arrive, wondering what the hell was going on. One of my neighbours, an elderly woman, made me come down. She took care of me until my mum came back home. The police took the creepy guy with them in the car and left. Before they left, they promised to come back and talk to us about what had happened. This is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The male police officer came back later in the night and sat down with me and my mum to talk. He explained that the guy on my patio was actually diagnosed with severe autism. He'd escaped a facility where mentally challenged people lived, located around 5 kilometers from where I live. He explained that the guy had actually been living in my house 5 years ago, but he had been forced to move when his mum, his only caretaker, had died. The poor guy probably thought that he would find his mum in my house. He missed the routines and he missed living there with his mum. The police had to remove him from the house that time 5 years ago. Because he was extremely strong, from what I had heard, he had extreme tensions in the body because of the autism, making his muscles grow stronger and stronger throughout the years. This was the reason he reacted the way he did when the police came this day. Still frightened, I told the police officer what he needed to do to make sure this would never happen again, and he promised it wouldn't. After a few sleepless nights, my life got back to normal. The years went by and the guy didn't come back. Until 1 year ago. At this time, my mum and dad had moved out. I bought the house from them and I'm still living there today. I was enjoying my morning coffee on the patio when I see this random guy stopping on the road by my fence. He just stands there, looking at me. I look at him and give him a nod. And then I hear the high-pitched noises. Holy shit, it's him. His hair had turned grey, but the high-pitched sounds made me realise. My heart started racing, and I instantly remembered the reason why he was back. I realised that he must have managed to escape again. Because I kept my cool a bit longer than when I was 9, I started to realise how sorry I felt for the guy. 16 years later, and he was back again to look for his mum. I decided to carefully ask him if he wanted to come down to the patio. He instantly jumped the fence. I started to think he would knock me out like he did to that police officer. He didn't. He smiled. He looked at me and smiled. I offered him to sit down. He didn't respond. I offered him to come inside. He started laughing. We went inside. His face lit up. Pure joy. He was home. It reminded him of the life he had had with his mum. It almost made me tear up. All of a sudden, he sat down on my couch, turned on my TV, and switched directly to the cartoons. I observed him for a while. He was just completely focused on the cartoons. I just wanted him to enjoy that moment, so I didn't say anything to him. I realised I had to call the facility to let them know. The caretakers arrived 10 minutes later. After a lot of convincing, he got back up crying, and they went back to the facility. I called the facility 2 days ago. We made a deal. His name is Tom, and I now consider Tom my friend. Every Sunday, from the day he returned, Tom and his caretakers visit me to watch cartoons. They say it's the highlight of his week. It makes my heart warm. Now, for several years, my thoughts were, let's not meet guy on my patio eating from the ashtray. Now my thoughts are, let's meet every Sunday to watch cartoons, my friend Tom. 4. I saw a man on my porch with an axe and we never found him. 2 stories. Information. Before my dad sold this house, we had the front door, then a little room before you actually entered the house. Like a mudroom or something. You had to get through 2 doors before you could enter the house, basically. My dad moved into his mum's house because, she's getting older. And you have to get through 2 doors there too. Anyway, this happened a while ago, but I still remember it pretty well. I was at my dad's house with my sister, and she had a few of her girlfriends over to spend the night. I woke up before everyone else and noticed the light on the porch was on. It was a motion detector, so I decided to look outside and my heart dropped. I thought an animal must have made it go off. A guy, or at least someone who looked like a guy, walked across the porch holding an axe without even looking into the door, just on and off the other side. I was freaking out, and I woke up everyone to tell them what I just saw. They didn't believe me, and to this day, I'm the only person who remembered this incident. I obviously did not go and look for him, but I have no idea if he knew we were in there or not. Just thinking, it could have been a ghost, but I'm not sure. I was around 6 or 7, maybe younger. Second story. I was around 10 or 11. I have always lived with my mum and visited my dad every other weekend. Me and my mum were living with her now ex-boyfriend. He was awful. I could write a whole other story on him. Sometimes my mum wanted to sleep in her room with me so I could rub her back until she fell asleep. And this one night, after she fell asleep, I rolled over and was looking out into the living room. The house was set up as the house was connected. Living room and kitchen were connected. My room was one end of the living room and my mum's was across from mine. I saw a figure moving around in the kitchen. My mum's room was near the kitchen side. It was opening cabinets and things like that, so I thought it was just my mum's boyfriend. But he was a truck driver and he wasn't going to be home that night. I was silently freaking out, but then I looked away thinking I was crazy and it was gone. I didn't ever tell anyone because I assumed no one would believe me. 5. My friend and I had a party at a water park because our birthdays were so close and we have most of the same friends. The water park is sort of a well-known water park, so there were a lot of people there. When we got there, everything was normal. We put on our bathing suits right away and headed down to the water park. We went on a few slides together and then we were making our way down to the lazy river and this man came up to us and asked us if we'd seen a girl with a pink bathing suit. She looked to be around 6. We said no and left it alone. But me, on the other hand, freaked out that he'd lost his kid, so I kept thinking about it. We went to the lazy river and went around a few times, then just started getting bored and decided to go in the hot tub. We got there and we saw the same man that had lost his kid. So I said something about it to my friends. We got in and the guy was sitting on the complete other side of us. But then I noticed he started coming closer to us and then sat down next to me and one of my friends. She was next to one of my other friends, and then he whispered to my friend who was sitting next to him, "Hey, do you want weed or booze?" And she didn't say anything to him, but whispered to my friend what he had told her, and she told me. I told the rest of my friends that we needed to get out. When we got up, he tried to get my friend by grabbing her leg, which I had no clue had happened. So when we went to tell the lifeguard what happened, we found out that he'd asked another lady, but the lifeguard didn't seem to care. So we all ran out to tell our parents, and one of my friends turned around and saw him following us. We told our parents and they called the police because the security at the water park was horrible, and they said he wouldn't have even been removed from the park. Then I turned around and he made his way up to where we were going, back to his room. And I told our parents, and they chased him back to his room with the security. Later, the police showed up and we went in the back room for questioning, and we sat there for a long time while they were questioning him, and it took a while for any other news. Hours later, we found out that his daughter was actually in his room the whole time, and he drugged her and she was unconscious. So the ambulance showed up and took her. He is no longer in her custody. He was arrested, and then we found out he was drunk. Even though he was drunk, it doesn't give him a reason to have drugged his 3-year-old daughter. Even though he was drunk, it doesn't give him a reason to have drugged his 3-year-old daughter and touched a minor. It's almost a year later, and I don't know how much of what happened now. It's almost a year later and I don't know how much of what happened now, but he ended up on the news and we got a refund, but the water park didn't do much. And I'm glad that the police were called, otherwise his daughter may have been in a worse shape. So to the man that drugged his daughter and tried to get us to go to his room, let's not meet again. 6. I binge read this thread constantly and just remembered something freaky that happened to me in high school that I thought I would share. First of all, I would like to say that I'm not the only victim of this person. This is just a recount of my experiences. Junior year, I began getting followed on social media by a shit ton of fake accounts. These accounts would go after the hot girls at my high school. At first, it was just a bunch of message requests, which could easily be ignored. Then, one morning, I woke up to the sight of something so disgusting and vile, it would make Medusa jealous. I had been tagged in a pic of the micro penis this garbage of a human being had. I mean, this thing looked like the trunk of an elephant embryo. Gross. Untagged, blocked, reported. Account got deleted and all was well in my 16-year-old world after a while. Beginning my senior year, more of these accounts began to pop up, this time impersonating people at our school. I began getting threats almost daily from different users about how they were going to send nude photos of me to my family, college, and post them to the internet if I didn't do as he asked. A random threat about sending a photo of me hitting a jewel, edgy, to my college was thrown somewhere in there too. I've never been a mean girl, but when someone crosses me with threats, I leap into fight mode. I had no nude photos, so I knew he was bluffing, but still played along, at first to see what he wanted from me. Guy wasn't too bright. He wanted nudes in exchange for not exposing my nudes? Okay. I ended up telling at least 15 of these accounts that I knew they were bluffing and to just cut the act, as if there were multiple different people at our school. Not to mention, it was eerie that he'd obtained this photo of me dueling that I had not posted on any form of social media. I graduate, and I'm not too concerned anymore since I know I was going off to college soon. However, he took it up a notch that summer, hacking multiple girls on social media accounts, and even got his hands on one of my friend's nude photos that was saved in her memory, my eyes only section of Snapchat, and sent it to me, pretending to be her to coerce explicit photos out of me. About a week later, his IP address was traced. It turned out to be a guy in my graduating class. He was charged with 21 counts of child pornography and coercion. So, Mr. Micropenis, let's not meet ever again, outside of the walls of that school. Edit. Forgot to mention, this creep was photoshopping the faces of underclassmen girls onto mirror selfies of nude women. Sickening. 7. When I was 8 years old, and my little sister was 7 years old, my mum picked up a new job. She was always home before this, so we never needed a babysitter, but now we did. So she hired a girl who lived about 3 blocks away. She was seemingly a good person at first. Took us out to eat, bought us ice cream and toys. Then one night she stayed over at our house as my mum would not be able to come home due to complications they were having at work. In the middle of the night, she hid my favourite teddy bear, which I couldn't sleep without for no reason at all, just to see me cry. In the morning, I was bawling my eyes out and asking her where it was, and she didn't tell me. She lived a few blocks away. She'd take us to her house while we watched TV, and she showered and got us ready before taking us back and watching us at her house. Our house. One day, me and my sister were sitting on the couch and she came out of the shower. She went into her kitchen, grabbed a butcher knife out of the drawer and was laughing hysterically. She then proceeded to walk to the couch we were on and hold the knife at my throat while pinching my little sister's arm for about 5 minutes straight. She then put the knife back in the drawer and went back into the bathroom. She came out again about 10 minutes later and asked us why we were crying. When we informed her it was because of what she did, she pretended she had no recollection of it and convinced us that she was possessed. At this point, I could bathe alone because I knew how to clean myself. The babysitter followed me up the stairs with my little sister and told me that my mum had told her we have to bathe together and she had to help. We didn't believe her because we'd been bathing alone at that point, but we were so young it didn't take much convincing. When we got out of the bath, she made us both stand in my room and watched me get dressed and did the same thing to my little sister. She would always put her hand up our shirts, but we didn't realise it was wrong. One time, when I asked her to stop because she was hurting me, she threw me on the ground, sat on me, she wasn't very small, and poured an entire bottle of ketchup into my mouth. When I screamed and begged her to stop, she just laughed and told me to shut the fuck up. My grandma lives right next door but was working all the time. When she was home, the babysitter wouldn't let us go and see her. And when our family would come over, she would tell them they had to leave. We were taken away from my family for months. She then started giving me and my little sister what she called sucker bites, hickeys, on our arms and necks. Again, we didn't know it was wrong. One day, my grandma saw them and called my mum. Long story short, we chased down the cops that night and we had to go to a police station and explain in detail everything she'd done to us. The only thing that happened to her was that she got her babysitting license taken away. No real repercussions, even though there was proof of the hickeys. So, to the babysitter who sexually abused and tortured me and my sister when we were 7 and 8, let's not meet again.